There is a danger when you start to get to know people on Twitter, when you start to get to know people through social media, that you've latched onto a culture. And what you've latched onto is an individual within a culture who may not be even very knowledgeable about their own culture and not be able to represent it accurately. So if you're going to go with that approach, and it's not a bad approach at all, it certainly saves on everything. Get to know a lot of people. Get to deal with the idea that other cultures are as multifaceted, complex, feature-rich, self-contradictory as your own, and that no one individual explanation for how this goes down is correct. You get 10 different explanations from 5 different people that all contradict each other. Then you're starting to get to something resembling truth. And if you're going to write about it, you should write about it so that you have that kind of complexity, that kind of self-contradictory nature within each character, nevertheless in the dynamic between them. Otherwise, no matter what culture you're writing about, you have failed. And the challenge is, how badly do you want to fail? Do you want to fail so badly that anyone who's reading about it is just going to toss it across the room? Or do you want to fail badly enough where there's some recognition that, hey, he got this wrong, but he got this right. So there's no way to not fail when writing about our culture. It's just the degree to which you fail. And the care into which you put into it adjusts that. And sorry for my math.
Well, I think that's actually a really good way to segue into the fact that we talked really good to actually ask questions.
And I had something to say.
Oh, okay, well, let me say
this is just, I'll try to be brief, but I can't promise. In talking about subversion, one thing I was thinking about, this is even before the panel, and I didn't get to touch on this, but I ran about something else. I've seen this before, and it's something that I've come across in my own experiences. When you're writing about another culture, in a sense, being aware of where we are coming from, right? We're often talking about that other culture, not our own, and what we are bringing to that other culture. So I've seen attempts, I've fallen almost prey to it at times. I'm speaking of another culture, there's something there I don't like, maybe I'll fix it in my subversion, right? And then I was like, wait a minute, I remember people who were trying to fix things before, they would call the entire British Empire. Perhaps I got this Brixton hat on. Perhaps, hold on a second, smack my hand back. That's maybe not what I want to do. And I think it's something when we talk about subverting. I mean, I understand, of course, we live in an era of human rights and universality, which is good. That's a net positive. And yet, I think we sometimes have to be aware when we are approaching other cultures, what it is we want to, if we're talking about subverting, what it is we're subverting and why we're subverting if we're going to write about these other cultures. I think that's something that we should pay attention to because we're, of course, bringing our own ideas of what this culture should be like, right? In doing so. And so I can think of several ideas, whether it's the veil debate, then ready to go on or other things, where we may see, hey, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to make this character that is this certain way, because this would be better for this culture. Well, we're not fixing it in ours, but let's go over there and fix that one. And I'm not necessarily saying anything is necessarily wrong with that. However, I do think we should be aware of what we're doing, and that there's a history there, right? There's a history that's not always so positive in people doing that. So that's my short bit.
And if you don't know, sorry.
Whenever
you're
yeah, we need to get the questions.
Yeah, we're about to go. So we've got, let's get questions. Anybody has questions? Start there.
So one thing that I wondered, do you consider the cultural background of the expected reader when you're putting together a work? So for example, I come from a background that is headline, aristocratic, businessman. So I read Max's novels, I get his subversion, but I also look and go, oh, that's not Mexico City. And I don't know anything about Mexico City except to have the stereotypes, which I will not add to his novel in that. Right? Somebody reading who knows something about that probably reads it a very different way, right? And I think I don't think you can I have some things about so do you consider how your respective readers go into plant their culture onto your novel and change something from what you're expecting entirely? So I think that makes a big difference.
Yeah, I do. I consider that now. Because when I wrote my novel Huntress, which is inspired by Chinese and Japanese traditions, specifically Taoism and Buddhism, I realized I was writing it in a way so that culture was normal. Okay? Because the main character lives in that culture. She's not going to go around commenting on how exotic people's dresses are. Okay? So the thing is, when people who are not familiar with Taoism or Buddhism read that book, they often don't get it. However, I knew that there would be readers who did get it. And I did have readers write to me and say, thank you for writing this book. It felt so Chinese. You know, because the Chinese cultures that were in that book were not just that. It was the philosophical worldview. It was the magic system was based on Chinese cultural tradition. They got it. But I do know that I'm going to lose some readers who don't get it. At the same time, I have come to a point in my career where I'm kind of like, I don't care.
So, this will come off sounding very naive, but when you're writing, if you're trying to create a fantasy world that isn't necessarily, it's of course going to be based on things in the real world because we all come to it with our own cultures, our own backgrounds. But if you're trying to create something ostensibly original, I guess I'm wondering, I guess I worry about appropriation versus inspiration. And if you guys could just talk for a minute about that line, maybe? Is that too general?
No.
No, that's what I was expecting.
Yeah, I think we're all trying to answer one.
Yeah.
But I believe it's sometimes I think one of the things that comes up is you have to look at those cultures that you are ignoring that are the other. What is their role in the stories, right? If you read Tolkien or a half dozen other Tolkien clones, because I have around all across it, and all the brown people and all the people from away are barbarians, they're following the wrong leader, they're the monsters, blah, 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 right? If you're reading Martin and you read the Dothraki as savages, but not what's happening in the Seven Kingdoms, with the Targaryens, or the Lannisters, or the Starks, or everything. It's a lot of blood. I'm serious. Then you have to ask yourself, if you're writing those kinds of things, what does your hero look like? What does your hero's allies look like? Right? I like Tamora Pierce's work, but it's not escaping my notice that for much of her early work, well into now, she writes the Dothraki as these awful slavers in the South who are savages, but we don't really confront what's really happening with the foster system or maybe other things that are going on in the North, right? So you have to kind of look at why are those characters there, what role are they playing, are they villains, are they victims, are they actually fully fledged societies beings? That's, I think, the place to start.
One really dangerous trope of secondary world fantasy is the sort of trek, when you're starting to trek around the map and visiting all of the various countries, you start getting the Gulliver's Travels effect. Like, let me tell you what is weird and different about this place. Here they have monks that fall from the sky. And it supposes a lot of things, including being norms narrative, right? That you're seeing the differences of these cultures because you have some sort of normative position, which often in these sorts of books ends up being one that looks a lot like, you know, even if the person is supposed to be a 14th century farm kid, like a basically middle-class American existence. And that can get you into real trouble really quickly. I mean, there are a lot of things that can get you into trouble. That's one of them. So pulling away that presumptive normativity starts to make things a little bit more interesting. If the questing culture, the one that people are leaving, isn't safe, if there's stuff that is wrong with it, that is affirmatively wrong, that it's not the cool Shire that everybody's happy to hang out with everybody else knows before, then it can help. Or if you're showing these cultures from the inside that are having troubles relating to them, that the sort of synoptic view of the fantasy world where we're going around comparing is like really really dangerous.
I think somebody said, I think it was Mikki said about full-fledged characters. Having that person who's from that land and we know nothing about that land except that one person who tells you everything about that land, that's problematic. You know, it's that one guy, for some reason he's here. Are there more people like him? I have no idea. Or her? No idea. They're just here. And they may say something, my wife back then, or somewhere, but we know nothing of them. Then you end up, I guess, like one black guy was at the court in Georgia or Marcus office in Delaware, so he's just there, like furniture. Says something every once in a while, but nothing more. So I think it's important that if you are going to start talking about cultures that are different, that you do make them very well. Right? Make them so that they seem real, as I think somebody else said, when I was Walt, that, you know, that they're not noble savages, they're not perfect human beings, you know, or they're not also dothraki in some ways, where they are so brutal and you're like, whoa, don't want to ever run into them. So I think that's a good way to go about it.
Another thing to think about is people move a lot. Migration throughout human history has been a core theme. So as you develop your fantasy world, think about the movements of population. Think about how that causes conflict. Think about the interchange of goods. Think about trade. Think about the impact of different societies' assumptions about gender roles. Think and how they interconnect with each other over time. Develop a little bit of history that gives it some depth, not focused on just one place. Develop it evenly across your imaginary world so that if you come into a new place, there's more than just wallpaper there. And the people who are there have a history behind them, have motives that seep in that history, and including a history of contact with others from where these characters just came from, if you're doing a story that involves movement. So that you're putting your characters in the context of space and time in which cultures thrive. And if you do that well, don't worry about people who don't get it, because there'll be plenty of people who do. I love it.
So we've got exactly 2 minutes left to wrap this up. So we're going to take one very short question. That'll come in if you have a question that can be answered quickly. Going once, going twice. All right. There's no like I will also add on and point out that if you are writing a culture, even if it's a static culture, if your culture has spices and silk, they got them.